Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new series entitled Dealing with Childhood Trauma and the Effects. This is a podcast of MindCare and aims to provide hope and answers and take away the stigmas of childhood trauma. My name is Rochelle Knight, and I am your host. Dr. Dana Philisaint is a professional counselor whose focus is on childhood trauma. For more information about MindCare or Dr. Dana Philisaint, please go to mindcare.us. Today's topic is how the trauma of sexual abuse can impact a person's life and ways to avoid or recover from its effects. Hi, Dr. Dana Philisaint.
Hello, and welcome back again to another session of our podcast.
Wonderful. And I know last time we were going to talk about this, but today we're just going to jump right in there. So first of all, what is trauma?
Well, trauma is actually a time when a person feels an intense threatened by an event, or they are involved in certain events that are traumatic, or they witness certain things that are horrific in their lives, and so the exposure might cause the individual to feel a sense that they're in a trauma. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, are there different types of trauma?
There are 12 actually that's identified by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, and there are bullying is one, community violence is another one, complex trauma that incorporates different types of trauma all at once, disasters might cause trauma, early childhood traumas, earlier would be between the ages of 0 and 6, intimate partner violence, or in other words of saying domestic violence is another trauma, medical trauma, physical abuse, refugee trauma, and sexual abuse, and there's also terrorism and violence trauma, and also the last one is the traumatic grief. So when an individual is having to experience a loss and they're not sure how to go about dealing with it, so that could be a trauma for that individual.
And now I know that certain types of trauma, there's repeated exposure, there's a single event. Like, are the effects of the different types of trauma the same, or are they different?
No, not at all. Actually, the effects may be quite different. It's based on the individual, their environment, which includes their family, how the family reacts to that trauma, the intensity, the duration, of course, the involvement and how involved they're part of that traumatic experience. All these can have a different impact on an individual. And so because of that, our approach to the ways that we help individuals with trauma might be different based on their recovery time, the intervention that they might need, the treatment that they probably need. And all these might be very varied based on the individual's needs.
Now, I know today's discussion is about sexual abuse. So do you have any statistics to share with the listeners?
Well, this is actually a very important topic for us to share because not a lot of people know some of these statistics. For example, did you know that 1 out of 10 children have experienced abuse, sexual abuse, before the age of 19? That's pretty sad. And then out of that, 1 out of 7 are girls. 1 out of 7 are girls, and 1 out of 25 are boys before the age of 18. That's one really bad statistic. Another one to consider is the fact that this is interesting, actually. Between the years of 1993 and 2006, they thought there was a decrease in childhood sexual abuse, whereas it turned out 38% of the victims never disclosed that they were sexually abused during that time. And there's some that never disclosed. So because of that, that's why the number seemed, such a high decrease. In actuality, there were a lot of people that were not sharing that information. Another one is that nearly 70% of all reported sexual assaults were done by children before the age of 17. So actually, children are being exposed to sexual abuse much more than adults. So 30% adults report, 70% were children. And of course, I don't know if you guys know this, but Most of the time, these things are happening with someone they know. So it could be a neighbor, a friend, a family member, and it can be in the church, in the school, recreation places, or even in their own homes. So this is something that we need to discuss, because these things are taking place, and a lot of times they're not discussed. And it says that 90% of the time, the children themselves know who their abusers are. So 90%, and only 10% did not know who that stranger. It might be a stranger. But other than that, it's someone that they actually know. But here's a statistic that might be a good thing for some, that if it wasn't an adolescent that sexually abused a child, they're more likely to, we can't say that once a sexual offender, always a sexual offender. So if they receive the proper treatment and they understand the nature of what they're doing, later on they might get well and never even turn around and do certain things like that. And a lot of times they'll feel bad for the experiences that they, put someone else through. So there is hope as well with that.
Now, you made an interesting point. You talked about 70% of younger children. So my question is there a trend, or is it more common for younger children to report it? As they get older, they're less likely? So is it something that, conversations that could be had, like what can people do, especially with younger children? Like what can people do, to help, make them feel comfortable? Like, is there something that we can do to spot something like this?
The reason why it's 70% that's reported by children, it says, before the age of 17, is because there's a lot of us who are mandated reporters. So mandated reporters are teachers, school psychologists like myself, or nurses or medical professionals, or anyone that works with children are mandated reporters. So when the children maybe share that with someone they trust, we're mandated to report that information and tell it. That's why we, that number might be higher than those of the adults reporting.
Oh, wow. Those are amazing statistics. And how does the trauma of sexual abuse impact a person's life? Now, clearly it does. So what effects are you seeing in younger people and as they get older?
Okay. So one of the first signs that typically we see in the school system is a child, of course, academic might be going down. If they were fine before, now they're a struggling student, or their emotional, mental health problems might start giving you some certain signals that there's something not right. Anxiety might kick in. Depression is another thought. And, of course, there's a suicidal attempt, or even, threats that they have towards wanting to hurt themselves. There's also high over-sexualized behaviors that students might expose themselves to or to others. Sexual behaviors in general that makes you question certain things, in particular children if you knew them from before. But definitely their test scores, cognitive behaviors, memory might be impacted as well. Substance uses or substance abuse problem might start coming up, especially during the ages of adolescence. Another thing is crime, or delinquency in crime might be something that you might see they start taking part in, or even the risk of teenage pregnancy might be something that we need to consider, and the impacts that it has, sexual abuse have on people's lives. And, of course, there's longer term. So when we get to the stage of adulthood, you might see some of these mental health problems even higher. Of course, there's physical health that's impacted. Another thing that I saw in a lot of the research that I was looking at is fibromyalgia and STDs and things like chronic headaches, or even diabetes might have something to do with the child's experience of being abused as a young person. There's another statistic that shows that there are 3 areas in which the problem manifests itself. Usually in a negative way and psychosocial outcomes. That's the use of substances or, multiple marriages even. Not all instances, of course, but this is what the research is kind of showing the trend more likely to. And, of course, psychiatric diagnosis of anxiety, depression, or even certain type of phobias, eating disorder and suicidal thoughts, obesity, eating disorders, those kinds of things we tend to see a lot in adults that have experienced a child sexual abuse early on. So it's important that we, start taking action now to help people get educated on this event. And, males are not immune to this situation even as well. So for male abusers, they see that they're twice likely to have HIV than non-abusers in male in one of the studies that we saw. So this is something that we need to consider, that it's not only females, but there are also males that are impacted by this. And one last thing I want to say about the impact, with my 20 years of counseling experiences in mental health, I've seen personally that these individuals have a negative view on sex and sexuality in general. And, sexual abuse might impact their marriages. They're lost sense of identity. They're not sure who they are or what they're about. They are more likely to take very high risky behaviors. They tend to blame themselves a lot. And so the result of that, they have a very, they avoid meaningful relationships. And they might have that fear of committing to people as well. And one other thing that I think that's important for individuals to know, that their image of the Creator might be very negative, or their image of who God is might also be very negative, or tend to be more on the negative side. So those are the things that I've seen, and also what research is showing.
Oh, wow. I mean, you talked a lot about, mentally, physically, emotionally, sexually, spiritually, of all of these different aspects of a person that are affected because of just sexual abuse. And is it possible that a person can actually recover? And I know there's hope, but, is it possible for them to recover from these or some of these effects of sexual abuse?
I would always say there is hope. And, one of the things that might help an individual is to remember this acronym that I help my clients with, that seems to help them to remember, in a sense, as to why we even share these statistics and the ways that they can go about helping themselves get better as well. So the acronym that I use is BUT. But, I would say BUT to the second power. B-U-T to the second power. What does that stand for? So be aware. So making yourself aware of what the statistics are saying of victims, so that you're not a victim. So when you're consciously aware of these stats, you can say to yourself, I know that I need to get help, or I'm aware of what could potentially be, and so let me make sure that I do the things that I need to do so that I don't become a statistic or a victim of these long-term impacts. Another one is U, which stands for use your story for good. So there are so many people, as I mentioned to you, that are also impacted by sexual abuse. So finding ways to help them find their voice, or support them, or help others who are dealing with the same situation by telling your story, or tell them what you're doing to overcome as well, is a good way to help yourself. Another way is T, train your brain to behave. What do I mean by that? So what I'm saying is learn how to process your thinking by telling yourself the truth. You can use God's word, which is more powerful than anything. You can use, positive self-talk that helps you train your brain. Things like cognitive behavioral therapy is a model that we use, where we teach people how to change their thinking, in turn their way, which in turn would change the way that they feel as well. So all that can change the way that you view the world. It changed the way that you view other people, change the way that you view yourself. All of these things will help you to interrupt these negative thoughts, so that you can be a happier person. And the last T, like I said, is but to the second power. is take action. What do I mean by that? One of the things that we know, there's a disconnect at times that people have, understanding their relationship with their own bodies. So they need to have a different view of seeing themselves and who they are. And the way that they do that is not only by talking and talk therapy, but to take action. So things like exercising, sleeping well, eating healthy foods, getting the blood flow in the brain properly so they can process things more effectively, deep breathing exercises. So those things to kind of get to know your body a little bit much more than you do now. It's because people, when they deal with sexual abuses, tend to have a very negative view of who they are. And so by helping yourself with these very simple principles of exercising, sleeping, you start to understand how your body works. When you exercise, you actually start feeling better. So those are things that we also remind individuals. So remember, but to the second power.
All right, Dr. Dana Philistine, I like that. But to the second power, be aware of your statistics, use your story for good, train your brain to behave, includes positive self-talk, and take action. Is that what you said? All right, I like that. Practical, wonderful. Okay, and do you have any last thoughts for our listeners to provide them with hope, especially those who have experienced some type of sexual abuse?
Okay, so there aren't any good research, I can tell you that, about long-term outcome for individuals dealing with childhood sexual abuse. However, one of the things that I remember from a very young age that our parents taught us from John 3:16, and many people know it, says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." So, one of the things to remember is that the enemy, which is Satan himself, he meant for evil all those things that took place, but God can definitely turn it around. So remember all that but. Apply the buts to the second power in your life, and you will learn that you're worth it, you're valuable, and your importance is not based on your experience, and that you are an overcomer. And so start remembering these principles, and that you can be victorious regardless really is a blessing, and that the Lord does have a but in your life, meaning, all those things happen, but you can be victorious. So but to the second power, remember that.
That's fantastic. I like that. You are valuable. You
Absolutely.
are valuable. All right, Dr. Dana Philistine, do you have any resources out there for our listeners if they want to hop on the website? What resources do you have available for our listeners before we close?
Absolutely. So, of course, please visit our website. Share the information with others that you're learning. We are also doing a blog, so share that blog out to as many people as you can. And I will be writing this information in an article as well, so that you can easily share with those who don't have the podcast option. And just make the information be known that they can be overcomers, and they're not doomed. It's not all doom and gloom, because we do have hope.
Fantastic. You are valuable. We
Absolutely.
have hope. Dr. Dana Philistine, it was an absolute pleasure. Like Dr. Dana Philistine was saying, please visit mindcare.us for more information. Any resources that are on the website. Or more information about Dr. Dana, if you want to contact her, her contact information is there. And as well, we definitely hope you guys will come and visit next week on next week's podcast, another fantastic topic. And thank you for joining us today on dealing with the trauma of sexual abuse.
That's
Thank
right.
you.
Like us on Facebook and all the other medias. All right. God
Sounds
bless.
great. All right. Bye-bye.